You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log Prodigy, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 1, Lost and Found.
Welcome into the very first episode of Mission Log Prodigy, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Norman Lau.
And I'm Ashley B. Robinson. Much like our flagship Mission Log podcast, each week here on Mission Log Prodigy, Norman and I will discuss each and every episode of this animated series, discover what makes them special, and see if there are any morals, meanings, and messages contained therein. Hat tip to you, John. This week, we will be reviewing the premiere episode of Star Trek Prodigy, Lost and Found. And spoiler alert, like red alert sound effect here.
Red alarm. Red alarm. Crossing the streams.
If you're not caught up on
Lower Decks.
Dying. On Lower Decks. There's a joke for the visuals only. I have nothing for you. You need to catch up on Lower Decks. But as Norman said, red alarm. Please remember, this is an in-depth review podcast. So if you haven't seen Lost and Found, you may want to watch it first and then come back and listen to us. We'll give you time to do that. Welcome back. Wasn't it a great episode?
Fantastic. And I'm glad we can share that with everybody. And, we're also doing something here a little different here on Mission Log Prodigy. So we're going to be releasing this show both on YouTube and as a regular podcast download. So be sure to engage the like button and subscribe to our Mission Log Prodigy channel here at Roddenberry Entertainment. And please make sure to follow this podcast on your podcast catcher de jour.
En français maintenant.
Ouais.
Mais en avant que nous commencer, before we start, we want to make sure that you know how to contact us. But what this is recording. Okay, but this is the important part, my friends and fellow crew members, especially if there are younger Prodigy fans out there who would like to share their thoughts on the show. We don't want old Prodigy fans. Norman and I are in that category. We want the little baby Prodigy fans. So if you want to hear your voice on the show, please send us a 1 to 2 minute voice message at missionlogprodigy@roddenberry.com. I'm not going to spell it. It's too many letters and you're very smart. And in the message, there's just like a couple things we need you to answer. So your first name and your age. Did you like the episode? What was your favorite part of the episode? And did you learn anything? And we're so excited to hear all of your comments. We're really looking forward to them. And they're going to be featured at the end of the published podcast episode. So you're going to be in the audio feed. How cool.
Super cool. And thank you so much, Ashley, for that. And now it's time for this episode's recap. And just a side note, so many of you may have noticed while watching this episode that it's literally twice the runtime as a standard advertised Prodigy episode. It was 46 minutes long. A regular episode is 23 minutes long. So in the recap, I'm going to try to get to as much awesomeness as I can. So let's see how this goes. And now, Star Trek Prodigy, Episode 1, Lost and Found. Deep within the penal colony mines of Terra Lamora, Dal, a young wisecracking miner of an unknown species, is plotting a daring escape. However, when he is questioned by Dreadnought, the mine's enforcer, about the ever-elusive fugitive Zero, Dal's mouse almost gets him into big trouble until Zero creates a diversion, which, to Dal's surprise, allows him to almost escape. In a desperate attempt to reach the height of the security dome, his stolen wreck of an escape vehicle takes flight and sadly plunges downward and back into the mines. Meanwhile, after turning down a trade deal with a Kazon, who wanted to exchange a Cation child for a shipment of ore, a young woman who is talented in speaking many alien languages meets with a diviner, an ominous being who runs the mining facility and who is also her father. He wants to question Dal about Fugitive Zero to keep her from learning about certain special plans he has in store. And if she can't, the diviner's enforcer Dreadnought will. Later in a holding cell, Dal has a brief conversation with a voice who tells him that he's special, that he inspires hope. Before he can discover who he's been talking to, Dal is immediately escorted to meet with Gwen, the diviner's daughter, of whom Dal is quite familiar. Gwen tries to persuade Dal to confess everything he knows about Fugitive Zero, and in the heat of her interrogation, she lets slip that Zero is a Medusan, a dangerous and powerful telepathic species. So here's the deal. If Dal can capture Zero, who has since fled into the deepest, dangerous mines, he will gain his freedom. If not, then he will have to answer to Dreadnought. While descending into the deep mines, Dal notices that he's tethered to a giant rock-like being, and after a time, they lash out at each other. But when an accidental mining beam causes a large rock formation to fall towards Dal, this gentle giant uses its body to shield him from being crushed. To both of their surprise, the cavern didn't entirely collapse on them and revealed a treasure trove of precious ore. But even more so, Dal and his new giant friend stand awestruck at the foot of what appears to be a starship. Naturally, Dal and his companion explore what appears to be an empty ship. No lights, no crew, and no power, until a rocky-scaled finger presses a glowing triangularish button on a black console. Lights, sound, and power course throughout the ship, and the two companions find themselves yelling at each other. But understand what the other is saying? How is this possible? It appears that the ship has activated some type of translation matrix, as Dal and Rocktalk, that's her name, are finally communicating, which puts them both at ease. From a distance, Fugitive Zero has been watching them and finally boards the ship. Zero confides in Dal and Rocktalk that neither a he or a she is a Medusan, feared across the galaxy for their telepathic powers, and for good reason. Zero was once captured and forced to do unimaginably cruel things for the Diviner. Zero also tells Dal and Rocktalk that the Diviner has been looking for this particular ship. In short, time to leave, as in right now, which also means that they need a crew, and especially an engineer. And after an amazing display of reverse psychology from both Dal and Rocktalk, they convince the Tellarite tinkerer Jankum Pog to lend his hand hammer to their cause. Meanwhile, in Gwen's quarters, she's educating her Cation companion on the value of universal language, until Dreadnought barges in and tells Gwen that Dal isn't where he should be. She sends a pack of Watcher drones after him, and just as Rocktalk introduces Murph, a glittering, gelatinous, bag of spit, as Jankum calls it, as the newest member of the crew, Zero pleads with Dal to help save them all as only he can. Carefully approaching Gwen, Dreadnought, and their Watchers with a barrel stuffed with Camarium ore, he tries to tap dance around where he's been all this time. But knowing Dal as the fast talker he is, Gwen begs him to tell her the whereabouts of Fugitive Zero. But when Dal hesitates, Dreadnought takes charge, having his Watchers drag Dal away to the brutal outer surface mines. As Dal works the surface mining wheel, he reminds Gwen, through a private comms channel in his helmet, of a memory that connects them in a very special way, and reveals that Gwen too has a desire to be amongst the stars. Suddenly, the surface machinery explodes, and Dal escapes and races back to the ship and his friends, leading Gwen, and more importantly, Dreadnought, straight to the Protostar and to Fugitive Zero. Gwen then is ordered by Dreadnought to sweep the ship for any more of these unwanted. Suddenly, Dal inspires this newly forged ragtag crew to fight back and escape into the safety of the ship, where they manage to capture Gwen. The drone's firepower meant for Dal and his fleeing companions miss them and strike the crystal barricade surrounding the Protostar instead, and unsticking it from its resting place. The ship is free, and not exactly flying, but more like falling with style. But Zero, in a stroke of luck, manages to engage the engines, and the Protostar speeds away into the network of mining caverns. However, Dreadnought is not so easily defeated. As the Protostar crew tries every possible button and panel to maneuver the ship towards the surface, Dreadnought uses his superior cybernetic body to thwart their plans. But when Dal finally engages the shields and Murph finds the pew-pew button, the Protostar blasts its way out of the mines and into a galaxy of stars. As the Protostar and her crew speed forth into the uncertain and unknown, one last surprise sneaks up on all of them. Rock Talk declaring to Gwen that Dal has friends now to help him. That word, help, activates something in the ship's computer. Suddenly, a uniformed woman materializes, tall, confident, statuesque, and holographic. She identifies herself as hologram Janeway, their official Starfleet guide who welcomes them aboard the Federation's starship Protostar, and to what will no doubt be the voyage of a lifetime. And even though they may have been beaten this day, both Dreadnought and the Diviner are still out there, and the Diviner wants back his ship. The end. Thank you very much.
Got a lot in there for how much happened in this episode.
46 minutes worth of a lot of happening in this episode. So, okay, Ashley.
Yeah.
Lots to talk about. And so let's jump right into it. Let's jump right into our observations on Lost and Found. What struck you? What was memorable during your first viewing?
So the first thing that really stuck out to me is that it felt like a Star Wars animated TV show. And I know people are flipping their desks and throwing their phones and slamming their laptops down. Like, how dare you, apples and oranges, all of that. And I mean that with the highest compliment, because I really enjoy Clone Wars. I really enjoy Rebels. And this reminded me a lot of the Star Wars Rebels pilot. I mean, down to Ezra Bridger's arc through the beginning episodes and Dal's episode arc. Like, it's definitely not paint by numbers, but it's very similar. And I watched all of Rebels and it made me cry in the end. So I thought that's a big plus. I liked it. I think it's going to take a couple episodes to establish its own voice. We had to meet a huge cast. We had to explain where we were. We had to upgrade a starship. So I know in coming episodes, Prodigy is going to carve out its identity more and more. Probably by episode 3 or 5, we'll get a better sense of what it is. But immediately I was like, this is Rebels. And I'm not mad about it. Like, I'm very here for it.
Well, it was very cinematic, right? So my very first impression was this just felt almost too big for a small screen. It felt very theatrical, the kind of thing where you settle into your chair and then you eat your first huge bucket of like buttery dripping popcorn, and then the previews start, and then you go for your second bucket of popcorn, and then you enjoy the movie. That's how I felt about when I first saw I would say like the first half of this, because I think the first half of this, I totally agree with you. It felt very Clone Wars-esque, Rebels. I think that comparison really just comes with the animation style. And I even do think that there are vast improvements over what we saw in the Clone Wars a few years ago to
absolutely
cutting edge, bleeding edge animation that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, for sure. Aside from the obvious comparisons there, the animation, like you said, is absolutely stunning. Something that I think New Trek does really, really well is they have a very unique aesthetic sensibility for every single show. Every show looks slick. It looks individual. Whereas in the 90s, and that's the difference in budget, that's the difference in technology available, everything very much felt the same, right? It was the same kind of gray walls. It was the same kind of carpeted look. And Discovery looks different from Lower Decks, looks different from Picard, it looks different from Prodigy. And doing the two animated shows here on Mission Log, they couldn't be more separate. And I think that's amazing. Like, this episode looks as expensive and as well crafted as any of the other shows that run the gamut across the Star Trek that we're getting right now. And man, like, when there's a shot where Gwen is looking into space and the cosmos are reflected back in her eyes, like she's having that sort of young, youthful realization that she is star stuff. And I was like, I can't believe this is animated. Like, it looks so real. It was absolutely beautiful.
So the next couple notes that we have to do with characters.
Yeah.
There's a character here that you seem to have attached yourself to pretty immediately.
I got a girlfriend in this already. Just like in the pilot, I was like, Dendy's my girlfriend. And she's perfect. And I love her. And that's why she's on my shirt today. Yes. So Rock Talk, the second she showed up, I was like, that's the plushie. Oh my gosh, I will buy it. It's so cute.
It's so fluffy.
Look at this sweet little baby angel. And I, like many people growing up in the world that we do, was like, what a cute little boy. In the overalls. And then the reveal that Rock Dog is a sweet baby angel girl with the cutest voice, voiced by an actual child, an actual young person, and there's a lot of adults here playing children, but she's, oh my gosh, her headshot is so cute. And I think that kind of like what's really charming about the original Peanuts voice cast, I think there is something that having a really talented child actor voicing a character like this, there's just like a heart and an innocence to her. And I was like, she's perfect. We must protect her at all costs. I love her. I love that she is huge. She doesn't look typically feminine. Like that's an issue with a lot of animation, is characters who are often too young will have a more feminine figure, or they'll be busty. Like she just looks like an adorable little kid in overalls who you would, see on the playground rolling around in the rocks. Like she's red, which is my favorite color. She's giant. She's like Ben Grimm. Like she's the best. I love her so much. She's so cute.
Well, I thought the Fugitive Zero character was actually really interesting because I loved how Zero introduces not he or herself just as Medusan.
What an
exactly
important thing to impart to children. And also, you're sort of double dipping because usually in Trek, we've seen energy beams from TOS, right? And they're just sort of these amorphous blobs. Like, what an intelligent way to probably get it. I saw these all and I was like, these are going to be great action figures.
Oh, totally.
What an intelligent way to have your robot and eat your space creature too. I can't make the metaphor work, but
eat your cellular peptide cake and too. Is that it?
Yes.
That's where we're going. Sure.
I mean, Zero is so cool. And in terms of the character design in general, they've done a really good job at presenting us different body types. And I think that that's super important. And then to extend it to neither he nor him, I was like, oh, this is really special. Like Steven Universe, I think a lot of people credit with opening the door to having this kind of language for children. And it's lovely to see that Star Trek continues to be at the cutting edge of changing contemporary understandings of what it is to be a living being. I won't say a human because there doesn't appear to be any humans yet.
Exactly. And I think that's very responsible for the writers to think about characters in that way, not just from looking at, say, just the silhouettes of all the characters, because all the body types are different. And some of them are humanoid, some of them are alien. Rock Talk obviously was a subversion of expectations, especially when she started talking. So that's what I love about the show so far. It's that it's really embraced the risk-taking in the medium that it's pushing. But something familiar that it's just kind of wrapped around me like a warm blanket were all of the wonderful music cues by Michael Giacchino, but also some of the newer music that's coming from the new composer. I just love the music cues. I really love the way that it feels, the way that it sounds, the way that it makes me feel. And it makes me feel like I'm in this larger cinematic universe. Also fantastic, the design of the Protostar. Let's talk about the design of the Protostar, because I think that it's such a brilliant hybrid pardon the pun, of what we've seen before, say in the Intrepid class ship on Voyager, because it's very Voyager-esque, but you also see a lot of kind of like the new aesthetic from the 2009 J.J. Abrams universe. I think that the hybridization is on point. I think the LCARS displays are fabulous. There's a design element in there that harkens to the past, but also pushes the present design philosophy for where you think the Federation should be, which raises a bigger question. It's an NX ship. We can see that on the hull. The Protostar itself has an engine in its secondary hull, which we see in the credits. So exactly where did this ship come from, and why does the diviner want it so badly? It's literally the last thing that we hear in the episode.
I have so many theories, but I actually think this is a theory, I guess, about the show. I think the credits that we saw at the end are going to be the opening credits going forward. I think they were just doing a good job at hiding, because particularly if you're a younger viewer, you probably are not as familiar with reading all the Deadline articles as people like Norman and I. So I think they were trying to hide the final scene reveal. I was so happy when the football shape came back. I've always described Voyager as being shaped like a football, and I think it is such a cool, slick design. And this is also because I read the articles and we know that Robert Beltran is in the show, but I think it's a Chakotay ship somehow. That's my
Interesting.
prediction.
Ashley
Or that
throwing
he
down the
had
big
something
prediction.
to do with it. Yeah, or with it winding up here. Also, I fully been calling it the Shatterstar in my brain? Yes, that's for all the Transformers fans out there.
Well, we know that Robert Beltran, in one of his more recent appearances, I believe it was in Star Trek Las Vegas, that kind of let the cat boots out of the bag.
Kinda.
Right? I love cat boots, by the way. That's
a t-shirt.
That's living in my head rent-free from now on. So he was in cat boots with himself, revealing that small detail that he's going to be part of this show. But I want to ask you, and I want to ask the audience out there, did you feel that there was a little bit of a bait and switch with Janeway's hologram appearance at the end, given the fact that she was marketed so heavily the months prior to this, and definitely during Star Trek Day, and definitely on the internet and on social media when everyone said, yes, Kate Mulgrew is coming back as Captain Catherine Janeway, kind of.
So here's my second big theory. So
two big theories in one show.
Two theories in one show is that I think the hologram is going to have a much more prominent role to play going forward. And I do think, because this, more than any of the other series, is definitely trying to bring in a new generation and a different audience than Trek tends to draw in. So I think they were smart leaving her for the end of this initial arc. So I think she's going to be part of a bigger thing. But if it were me and I wanted to, let's just keep the bad metaphors going, have my Kate Mulgrew and Eater too, I would not only have Janeway with the Bun of Steel show up, as we've seen here, but I would see Admiral Janeway
interesting.
Show up at some other point in the series. So maybe she is both revisiting the younger Janeway years and reprising and updating her role. So then that way they technically never lied to anyone.
Well, we have a lot of episodes in Prodigy to maybe get to that point.
So many. There's like 20 episodes.
Exactly. And we're
not complaining.
We're all here for it. But these were our initial observations. This is something, points of interest that we felt that just stuck out memorably to us. But this is something that we do in Mission Log. We take the breakdown, we listen to the review, we get past our observations, and we kind of settle into this part of the discussion about the finer points. This is something that traditionally in Mission Log is where we see the morals and meanings and messages and the discussion points that really are relatable, relevant, and meaningful to the wider audience, and hopefully especially to the younger audience. So Ashley, let's talk about like some of these more profound philosophies and some of these morals and meanings and messages that you may have mined from this episode.
I think that probably more than a typical episode, the morals, meanings, and messages are very much on display here in Prodigy. And again, with an all ages audience in mind, or trying to get past this wide berth, you sort of have to be. And I love that. I think culture and identity are at the forefront for me. New Trek in particular seems to love playing with this idea of nature versus nurture, right? The eternal question about why we are the way we are. I think Michael Burnham's a really great example of that. Is she human? Is she Vulcan? And sort of grappling with that in different ways in every season of the show, all the way through the sort of New Trek era to Dal. I keep wanting to call him Dull, like the Indian food, where I don't know why. I guess he looks tasty. Where we see that he is grappling not only with his upbringing, but like who he is and what his species. I love the sort of dangling participle of like what his species is, and nobody recognized. Like, I think that is so interesting, and I think they're going to mine a lot of really interesting content there. But even with the ragtag crew, if you're not familiar with like Tellarites and characters from the other shows, they all are sort of minor characters who have a sort of meh to negative connotation, depending, your mileage. I know Larry Nemeczek loves the Tellarites. More power to him. I like this Bebop and/or Rocksteady update that we have Jason Mantzoukas screaming through for the whole episode. But so we've taken all of the expectations of what it means to be this type of character, and I think we're going to be twisting it. And setting that up in the pilot is going to make for a lot of really smart conflict. And it tells us as viewers who recognize that right away that this is what we're mining for. And all the Janeways and all the Trek and all the General Grievous style robots, that's the cheese crumble on top of your dressing. Kids eat salad, right? Right. That's a great metaphor.
One of the things that I found really very important in this episode was this very much of a through line of the communication is really important. Because I loved in the beginning how Dal said, you've taken away our universal translator, so we basically can't talk to each other or at all. There's a scene with Gwen in the Kiatian, what am I, Jamaican? Kiatian? Kiatian
Meow, meow, meow.
child.
She's so sad. Can you believe they left her? I was devastated.
They have to come back for her.
Yes.
They have to
come
back for her.
Please, right? I'm begging you, please.
But she's actually teaching her this interesting thing. She's surrounded by this almost like this holographic scroll of language icons or, some type of universal translation matrix that's teaching her all of these different languages. And she's telling the Cation that these are windows into different cultures. I found that particular scene so profound because this is where we learn about Gwen wanting to go out there and be amongst the stars, as you said before, reflected in her eyes, but also reflected in her soul. Language is what breaks the barriers down between cultures. We saw that in so many different characters in Star Trek, especially Hoshi and Enterprise. The universal translator in and of itself, built into the ship, built into the new communicator, built into the communicators of all the tech that we've seen so far in Star Trek, it's important because that's how we understand each other. That's how we understand our meanings and morals and messages across cultures, across species. I love how they push the point, but not in a very aggressive way, in a very world building kind of way. I love that about this show. So what do you have next?
I really hope that the cat, I hope that her name is Lois, because that's a reference for anybody who follows Norman on Instagram.
Oh, my heart. Or Cat Boots. That would be hilarious.
Cat Boots. Oh, yeah. Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Right?
That's why you're the host.
Cat Boots.
The other, because my third one is mostly a joke, but the other main thing that I thought was really strong here is the idea and the value in found family. And Trek crews from the beginning have always been an allegory for family. My favorite series, DS9, really, really hammers that home. And this show seems like it is just poised to really embrace that and celebrate what unites us rather than divides us, which ties into what you were saying about language and the language barrier and understanding and bringing cultures together. I think it's a really smart building block. And it also adds the question around everyone's respective identities of, is it more important that I'm a Medusian, or is it more important that I'm Zero and a member of this crew and a member of this family? And I think particularly with Gwyn, because she obviously has the evil, Walter Bishop is going to be the villain of this season. Denethor is going to fling himself off a space cliff on fire in the end. She's going to be grappling with that, but I think everybody else is going to have little arcs throughout the season where they have to choose the crew versus maybe other Tellarites or another character coming into their lives who they know. And I think the idea of found family is super important, and I think it's relevant now more than ever. And I think it's a big thing to tackle in what is ostensibly or could be sort of dismissed as like, this is a kid's show.
And that's the thing that I think probably set us back a little bit. We took a step back, and when we were watching this, we usually have a conversation prior to recording any show. Ashley and I do, and I think we were both just struck with, this is far beyond what they advertised as
Far
a kid
Beyond
show.
the Stars.
Hey-o. Right? Well done. Your random fandom knowledge is beyond my capacity to even understand.
This is why they pay me the big bucks.
It's really hard keeping up with Ashley. She's too quick for me. She is warp speed type of quick. But there's this aspect of dreaming amongst, being amongst the stars that I love about certain characters in this episode. Again, Dal, he's kind of like Luke Skywalker. He's never really happy about where he is. Well, obviously he's not happy about where he is. He's in a mining prison colony, but it's kind of like Tatooine, right? You're stuck. Yeah. There's nowhere to go. Yeah. There's no up, there's no down, there's no sideways. You're there. Gwen very much the same way. Like Gwen and Dal are very much similar to Luke Skywalker's just desire to leave where he is, to be there amongst the stars, because he feels that inside him there's something that's pulling at him, or both of them, I should say, both Gwen and Dal, that they're meant for something better. They're meant to do something greater. And I like that it's being shared, this responsibility is being shared between two different characters of two different genders, so that there is identity and diversity in the main characters, so that the breadth of the audience out there, especially the younger audience, are like, I can identify with this hero, or I can identify with this hero, or you know what? Put all that aside, I identify with Murph. Right?
Shout out to Murph. So cute. Again, the toy possibilities. Like, is Murph going to be squishable? Are they going to be a planter? Please make them a planter. I want to put a flower in Murph's head. D. Bradley Baker, also underrated genius. But I have to ask you this, Norm, because this is who I am. Are Dal and Gwen gonna kiss in these 20 episodes?
I don't. You know what? Is that something that we want, or is it something that's
my question?
Well,
because it took the easy comparison, right, is Avatar: The Last Airbender. It took Aang and Katara 3 whole seasons, but I think the pilot is trying to show us that might be an inevitability.
Well, there's definitely a connection between them, because I love the scene where they have that private moment in his head comms channel about the window to the galaxy, or something that describes something so beautiful that he can't really put it in words. But was he talking about the constellation, or was he talking about her and the allegory of the constellation? And of course, there wasn't really the greatest amount of angst or drama during their interrogation scenes. She knows who he is.
That's true.
And she kind of takes it easy on him. And Dreadnought kind of knows that he's like the evil Vulcan, like, no, if he deserves punishment, punish him. Period. The end. Thank you, General Grievous. Hide your lightsabers.
Yeah.
Exactly, right?
I mean, down to the cape. Definitely an inspiration.
But the wave motion gun at the end was pretty awesome. You know, his handheld pistol, pew pew, wave motion gun. But I think that they do have a relationship. Maybe they've been there for so long. Maybe they were, I don't know, they just had a rapport, because he was the only person on that planet that she could relate to from an age standpoint, from an interest standpoint, from a dreamer's standpoint. So that's what I love about this whole aspect of looking at the stars and dreaming of what you could possibly become, because who doesn't do that? We've all done that. Right? And I think that that's part of Star Trek's allure, its charm, that someday one of us, all of us as a planet, a species, will be there looking up at the stars.
Captain
and eventually,
Kirk just went there.
Exactly. And then looking down at this planet. And there's a great romanticism about that. But speaking of romanticism, let's talk about the burning question. Let's talk about the Chakotay.
Yeah, so my note says, but what about Chakotay, though? And I know I already talked about it, but it's more, what I think is more interesting about leaving him off of this pilot episodes, which is actually the first 2 episodes, and waiting so long to introduce Janeway. And the Janeway hologram is so cool. I want to figure that too. Is how much recognizable Star Trek is going to tie into this, because the show, I think, feels more like a Nick show than it feels like a Trek show. And I don't mean that as a criticism. I don't think that is a bad thing. I just mean that as an observation off of 46 minutes of content. There's a long time still to go. There's lots of times for that to change. And I think we're going to start getting more and more things that are obviously Star Trek, because the structure of the show, the types of characters, the subject matter addressed, that's Star Trek to a T. That's stuff that we were throwing down in the 60s in this franchise. It just, at first blush, doesn't look as much like Trek as all the other offerings that we've had since Discovery premiered. And I'm really interested to see how that is integrated. Like, are we going to get a name drop of all the captains? Are we going to say Enterprise? Or how involved is Starfleet going to get here? Because if you do look at the cast list, you do know that there is a full crew coming up with names and some really stellar casts coming behind them. But I also think that in that, because I think there might have been some people who were better at keeping secrets, I think there are going to be again, for your eagle-eyed people who are counting things that fall out of the Cerritos ceiling in those scenes, I think there's going to be a lot of really interesting out of the box type Easter eggs coming up. And I'm interested to see how much Star Trek informs who these progeny, I guess, to be more grammatically correct, actually are.
Well, that's a really good point, because we're coming off of Lower Decks, the second animated series in the Star Trek franchise, the animated series from 1972 being the very first. And now, by comparison, you have something that's so radically different looking, but also at the same time so visually tied into the overall milieu of Star Trek, especially the way the starship looks, especially
Good word, milieu.
Thank you very much. I try to drop at least one big word in every episode to make up for all of the other errors that I make in this episode. The balance on the equation is pretty much lopsided on that. But I love like the small design changes, the risks that they're taking. Look at the Starfleet Delta. It's not quite the 5-pointed star, but it's different.
Did you see that Janeway's badge, by the way, was a Lower Decks Delta?
I did not notice that.
I screamed.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm going to have to pause. I'm going to have to hit pause on that and take a look. I love the fact that she's still in the Voyager era jumpsuits. I love those uniforms, but there are just these wonderful design cues that are pulling kind of like the aesthetic of Star Trek through this series. And like the Medusan. The Medusan is a character that was referenced all the way back in the original series. In the episode is in there, No Truth Beauty. At least they don't have to use Diana Muldaur to be kind of like the host of a Medusan that you would go crazy if you saw one. But that's a reference that you haven't heard of or seen of in a long time. But I love that you brought up both progeny and prodigy in the same sentence, because let's talk about how important the naming conventions are. This is something that I found very profound as a moral meaning or message, because names in Star Trek are very, very important. These are the things that people will pick to death in the nth degree on social media. Why this? Why that? Why not this? Or why not that? So I was thinking, why prodigy? So because the internet is infinitely smarter than I will ever be, I had to take a look at Webster's online dictionary, and that prodigy is defined essentially as a young person who is unusually talented in some way.
It's also from a feminine French word. So it technically refers to a female in the singular.
So if that's the case, and I love that, if that's the case, then are we talking about Gwen? Are we talking about Rock Talk? Who are we talking about here?
Oh, or are we talking about Rock Talk?
I know you love every time like Rock Talk. You like do Pee Wee Herman crazy style. It's like, oh my gosh, that's the secret word of the day, Rock Talk. So, but that's an interesting way of phrasing which main character is this prodigy or progeny, because she has been referred to progeny several times, both by her father and by Dreadnought. Is she like the Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia in the same character? Are we actually, is Dal kind of like the red herring that's kind of keeping our focus away from Gwen, developing who she is in the background? So
that's interesting.
These are all interesting things that we're going to see in the next 20 plus episodes. But also, I love alliteration. So there's the P for prodigy, there's the P for progeny, but there's also the P for protostar.
Oh, hey, again, because for some reason my brain keeps thinking it's Shatterstar. Would never have pulled that.
I dig you on that, and I feel you on that. But
yes,
because several Star Trek series have been named after their ships, Star Trek Voyager, Star Trek Enterprise, Deep Space Nine adjacently because it's the station, why Protostar?
Interesting.
Right. So I have a theory about this. My big theory. You have like way cooler theories, but here's my big nerdy theory.
I'm ready.
It has to do with like, what is a protostar? A protostar is a star that has yet to reach its fullest potential. So we have all of these prodigies.
So smart.
I'm working on a completely different level. My coffee must be.
Yeah, you are. Well, you had 2 cups of coffee. I only had 1.
And my Janeway mug, because I like to keep it in theme. But yeah, you have a bunch of these younger people that have left this planet, left the stifling conditions of where they were into a future of where they can be, developing into their very best selves, i.e. their very own versions of being protostars, i.e. also being prodigies at the same time. So
testify.
So instead of triple M's, instead of moral meanings and messages, we have triple P's at the end of this segment. So I love that the names mean something. They have to mean something. Names have power. Names have meaning. Names have purpose. But we have to, unfortunately, shift gears a little bit because we are coming up towards the end of the episode. And in our wrap-up discussion, I'd like to give us just a little bit of time to think about some of the takeaways, some of the things that either we would like to see or things that we're being led to believe, or just what was your overall impression? How do you feel about the show? Where do you think the show is going forward? Are we going to see, as you say, kiss, kiss, kiss?
Kiss, kiss,
I had to do
kiss.
the sound effects because some of this is going to be audio only. Where are you, Ashley, with kind of like your expectations for the show moving forward?
So my expectations were, I would say, managed. I was looking forward to it, but I wasn't like out of my head excited for it because it was aimed at a younger audience. And I do think that sometimes, and I say this as someone who writes books for an all ages audience, sometimes we don't give younger audiences enough credit for how sophisticated and smart and emotionally sophisticated they are. So like we've all watched kids shows where you're like, okay, but they're not like idiots, you know?
Right.
And I was completely blown away by how good this pilot episode was. It is a strong start. And if we keep at this level or go up, it's going to be contending with Lower Decks for how much I love it. It's a really, like a truly excellent pilot. I think everyone who worked on it should be incredibly, incredibly proud. I think we're very lucky as fans and consumers to be given the gift of a series that is so good. I think it also raises the bar on all the other shows to be like, again, well, if the animated kids show is this good, like you better come up to this level. You better make sure that you're exceeding it. So my expectations are now very, very high, and I'm very, very excited. In terms of what we're going to see, like other than my sort of crazy specific predictions earlier, I don't know what I expect. And that's the most exciting thing for me because at all points I was blown away. I expect things like every character will get an arc because there's 5 characters in 20 episodes or 5 speaking characters. I don't think Murph is going to have the hugest arc, kind of like Chopper to bring the Rebels comparison back again.
Good comparison. I like
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. The only character who I convinced is swearing in the Star Wars universe at all time.
Always. Absolutely. And always. Yeah.
So I'm expecting to see something. Every character is going to get at least maybe a 1 to 2 episode arcs, things like that. But I don't know what to expect. And that makes this one of the most exciting Star Trek things I've seen in a long, long time. So now I want to flip the question back on you. Let's ask what you're expecting.
Well, I said this to Rod in Mission Log Live when he was talking about what were my expectations for Prodigy.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I'm going to double down on what I said, but I do believe that after watching Prodigy and thinking about what I thought it was going to be like, just based on the marketing junkets and based on some of the snippets that we've seen, Star Trek, even if it's animated, doesn't necessarily have to be immature. It's not an immature show. It's a very mature show with very specific morals, meanings, and messages, with very specific lessons to be learned, but done so in a way where it's not talking down to anyone. And that, I think that's when Star Trek is at its best. It's when it talks intellectually and respectfully to its audience. And when it does it on a variety of different levels. And that's where the secret of really great writing is. Who is your audience and who are you writing for? But at the same time, though, the theologies, the philosophies, like all of the different ways that it can connect with an audience is in the way that the audience perceives the material. And if it's written right, and if it's written well, and if it's written with respect, that respect comes through intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, so that all the different levels, all the different like facets of one's personality will be able to find something in there and say, yes, that speaks to me specifically, whether it's the way that the characters are portrayed, or the fluidity of some of the characters' gender, or the way that the motivations of the characters, their nobility, or their wants and needs and desires. This is literally in a marketed show for kids, or sponsored by, or created by, or produced and co-produced with Nickelodeon. That's phenomenal. Really, it really is phenomenal. Now, there are obvious parallels that you can make with your Star Wars Rebels and Star Wars Clone Wars solely on the cosmetic level because of the animation.
Yeah.
But after that, once that comparison is over, it can very easily have fallen flat if it weren't for returning back to the Star Trek roots of what are the possibilities for these characters and how they're going to come together and how they're going to create this family that didn't necessarily have to be facilitated by graduating from the Starfleet Academy and being assigned to a ship. That's kind of like a workplace situation type family. Real families come together, in my opinion, when they have to rely on each other, mind, body, and soul.
Mm-hmm.
That is where I think these characters are going to go. They are on a foreign ship. They are on with alien technology. They are aliens to each other and themselves. So how do you break that barrier down, and how do you learn? How do you get past these differences that prove to you you're more similar than you think, than you are different? And I think that that's something that's going to be worth exploring. And I'm so glad that they're going to give us the time in all of these 20-ish episodes to be able to explore that. I just don't think that a series or a season half this time has the opportunity to really do that, with the exception of, and I've been proven wrong time and again, with Lower Decks. Lower Decks has done an amazing job on giving us characters like that. So that's my expectation. I'm with you, Ashley. I just want to be wowed every single time I turn on that TV for 23 minutes and then get back on here with you, talk about it, and be wowed again by the sheer speed of your wit.
Oh, that is, I was like, yes, that's so great. And now I'm blushing and sweating. That's so sweet. There's a fan. I can't deal with it. But also what a privilege that we get to do this as well. And I mean, how much would you have wanted to see this show when you were the target audience?
Oh, totally. Absolutely.
I would have fallen over myself and wept and passed away in this pilot for sure.
Yeah. The only thing dangerous now about being my age and being able to see this show is that now I can just
21. You're so old.
I know, right?
Ancient.
Just be able to throw copious amounts of money at all the Funko Pops that I want to collect, because I want my Murph Funko Pop.
All of them. I want them
and want my Rock Talk Funko Pop. I want all the Funko Pops.
I just got the Eagle Moss Cerritos, and now I need more action figures.
There we go. Ashley's shelves, by the way, are going to be just full of fantastic stuff come year's end or come next year.
That's only for the people watching.
So and yes, so thank you everyone for joining us here on Mission Log Prodigy. Ashley just flew her starship across the screen, so you can only really see that on YouTube. Now, if you enjoyed what you've seen here, please make sure that you subscribe to the show. Please make sure that you hit the notification button. Make sure that you engage the like button and share our new show out with as many friends and fans as you can, so we can grow our conversation about this wonderful new animated series as far and as wide as we can. Mission Log Prodigy is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment, executive producer Rod Roddenberry. Our website and your opportunity to comment and connect with us is missionlogpodcast.com. And if you would like to support Mission Log directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this very special premiere episode of Mission Log Prodigy. And we look forward to sharing our thoughts with you on episode 2, or is it episode 3? I don't know, next week.
Receiving listener communications. Message playback begins.
My name is James. I'm 6 years old, and I love the episode.
What was your favorite part?
When they blasted the phasers, and then blasting open the porthole, and then they got into space.
Okay, and did you learn anything from the episode?
You should never judge a person by their looks.
And who did they judge at first?
The big rock alien. She was really a little rock alien girl.
What's your name?
Sarah.
How old are you?
6.
Did you like the episode for Star Trek Prodigy?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. What was your favorite part?
Every part of it. So he said, do you know the way up? And then they didn't know what he was saying, so they did up.
And what did you learn, or what do you think the episode was trying to teach?
That you can't do anything alone.
That it helps to have friends sometimes? Yeah, that's true. All right. Thanks, Sarah. You say live long and prosper?
Live long and prosper. Well, my name is Zale, and I'm 8 years old.
Did you like this episode?
Yes, I did.
What was your favorite part?
My favorite part was when they discovered the crystal in the ship.
What do you think this episode was about?
I think the episode was about teamwork because they needed the engineer to fix the ship, and they needed that slime person thing to discover the torpedoes, and that big rock guy was the one who discovered the hologram, and also discovered the crystal area with the ship.
Okay, what's your name?
Jill.
And how old are you?
9.
Okay. Did you watch Star Trek Prodigy with me the other day?
Yes,
What did you think of it?
it was pretty good.
And what was your favorite part?
When he thought they were gonna leave him at the planet thing.
You think it was funny?
Yeah.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.